Hi, I'm James from Chaosium. When I sat down with Bridgett to talk to her about her career pathway into the TTRPG industry, I ambushed her with another series of questions on TTRPG fandoms. Bridgett came from being a huge TTRPG horror fan. And in her pathway into the industry, she got some really good insight from a player's perspective on all of the different kinds of TTRPG fandoms or niche groups and cliques that are out there. I asked her to share some of her opinions on these fandoms, and more particularly how the horror fandom, her area of expertise, differs from the others. I'm going to jump across to that interview in just a moment, but first, remember to subscribe to the Chaosium YouTube channel, and thanks for watching.
So backing more or less into my origin stories with gaming. So I came into gaming originally playing Advanced Dungeons and Dragons. That was the first game that I ever played. As I said in the previous interview, my AP Calculus teacher taught me that there was Champions and there was BattleTech, I think was the name of that system. So that was my gateway into gaming. And then I started exploring more horror gaming in college. And total transparency, Jamie, I just wasn't mature enough for it. I didn't know how to dive into a certain character. I wasn't appreciating the nuances of what terror was, what horror was, how to really dive into that, because I was conditioned to, I want to smack it dead. I want to hit it with a spell. I want to hit it with a mallet. And those are the things that brought me joy at the time. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with that genre of gaming at all. It was what brought me joy at the time, is what I was comfortable with. Then I slowly started getting exposed to horror, and I think my palette just simply changed. So what's unique or special about horror for me? I feel like when you're dealing with horror tabletop role-playing gamers, you don't just get a role player, you get performers. You get people who are coming in and they are truly dialed into who their character is, what their character wants, what their motivations are, and how they're responding to the world at large. And that's just a lot. It's a much different experience when you walk into a game from a place of vulnerability, from a place of humility, and a place where you're like, I might not make it off this table, but I care whether or not I make it off of this table, because so many things are out of my control and so many things are also in my control. And how do I find that perfect balance between the two? Does that balance exist? So for me, what was the original question before I started rambling?
So the original question was what sets the horror fandom in tabletop role-playing games apart from other fandoms, but I think you totally answered that. I want to
Okay, fantastic.
I want to redirect you very slightly.
Mm-hmm.
When, with retrospect, the benefit of hindsight, the initial flavor of role playing that you came into, would you be able to describe what that fandom was, and maybe what was your entry point as a fan?
Ooh, so that entry point as a fan was empowerment was a really big thing. You were either a superhero or you were controlling this, megaton mech, or you had spells and you had these tools to be larger than life. There's an escapism that comes with high fantasy gaming. That's a lot different than horror, but it's very empowering. It's very cool. And it's very much like you get to project yourself into your favorite movie or your favorite comic book or your favorite genre. And you get to be the hero. You get to save the village, or you get to deal with, the sorrow of the princess dying in the tower, or you are the one who killed that dragon. So that fandom has a certain energy about it, a certain empowerment about it, and a certain like, let's go get it doneness to it. And that's kind of what I was brought into.
So obviously there are a lot of different fandoms out there, and I don't expect you to have a list prepared in the back of your mind, but I'm really interested in the distinction you drew. One fandom being a genre, horror, and the other one being, I guess, a player fantasy, empowerment.
Yeah.
In your mind, or just off the top of your head, do you think that there are more genre fans, like more, fantasy or mystery, or more player fantasy fan genres like empowerment or power gaming or violence?
You're thinking just pure numerically in the forms of like the number of fandoms?
Or I suppose the fandoms that are the most represented, are the most popular within role-playing games in general.
Yeah. Okay. So this is me throwing my spaghetti at the wall as far as this answer. I feel like historically speaking, and even now, the entry point to gaming a lot of the time is going to be that empowerment, high fantasy type of genre, because it's very easy to relate to. You've seen the movies, you've done the comics, you've read the graphic novels, you know what it feels like to sit through Lord of the Rings, you know what it feels like to sit through Game of Thrones. So you can identify with these characters, this world, this setting a lot easier. I could probably say comfortably from my personal circle, I'd say 90% aisle, everyone came in through that particular genre and then started exploring role-playing games from there.
Is there a type of fandom within the role-playing game community that you don't feel personally connected to? Not necessarily that you don't respect it, but it's not your style, or you don't enjoy it as much when you dive into that kind of content or culture?
Yeah. So the one thing I'll say about fandoms, as I'm thinking about it, as you're asking these questions, fandom to me, I'm going to equate to like, what's your favorite type of food? You could absolutely love Italian food. Italian food is your jam. That is your mothership. That's what you can always default to. Birthdays, anniversaries, sad day, happy day. You can always go Italian. But that doesn't mean you don't like to rock with Chinese on the weekend. That doesn't mean you don't like barbecue on the holidays. That doesn't mean that you don't like Thai, you don't like sushi, whatever, things of that nature. So I believe fandom is set up very similar to that. You have some people that are dialed in as like, this is the only fandom that I rock with. I eat Italian food. That's all I do. Fantasy is my jam. That's all they want. That's all they'll do. I feel like most gamers have a more broadened or expanded palette. To answer your actual question on, is there a fandom that I don't particularly identify with? Your romance, intimacy type of gamers, those ones that are diving into anything that's like coming of age, romantic idiosyncrasies. One really good example is going to be Monster Hearts. That is a horror genre, but it's based very heavily on sex. And there are certain moves and items and things you can do mechanically when you have sex with another character, or if you flirt with another character. And I've played it a couple of times and I'm willing to try it again, but that's just not something I identify with as an individual. So I have a hard time relating to that particular fandom. The other fandom that I don't particularly relate well with is the pure dungeon crawlers. I don't care whether that's Call of Cthulhu. I don't care if that's RuneQuest. I don't care if that's D&D. If your jam is kick down the door and kill it and then do that for 4 hours straight, that's not my jam. I love the people that can do it. That's you, but that's just not my particular fandom.
So after years of attending a variety of conventions and seeing all the different fandoms and communities out there, and also exploring the industry as a professional, do you think that there is a fandom within the tabletop industry that has a common and popular interest, whether that be, empowerment or a particular genre, or, some other aspect of a player fantasy, but that are underserved by the modern range of products available to them?
Oh, that is currently underserved. This is one thing I love about the gaming community at large. I feel like, especially here recently, and especially with the uptick of the pandemic and how many people are going virtually and can connect with more people through media, I feel like those valleys, those underserved communities, those ditches are quickly being filled by people who identify a need. Like, there's a need there. I bet I can launch a Kickstarter and get that game off the ground. There's a need there. So is there something, a particular fandom, to my knowledge right now, that's not getting enough attention, that's being underserved? I can't call one. But I recognize that those probably do exist. And there's also really amazing creative people out there that I identify as C, and I was like, I'm going to go ahead and go after that.
So you talked about how your appreciation of a fandom swapped. You moved away from one focus into horror. Do you have advice for people who might be wanting to explore different fandoms in general?
No matter what your entry point is, whatever your fandom brought you into the hobby, even if you've been sitting there for 20 years, even if you've been sitting there for 6 months, go flirt with what's next door. Go explore with what's around the corner. It could be within your same publishing company. It could be a completely different genre. It can be a completely different fandom. But once you're in and you have an idea of what a tabletop role-playing game is and you enjoy it, go explore and see what else is out there, because your palette may change with time, with your own personal experiences, with age, things of that nature. And there's so much rich content out there that you can explore, but you have to be intentional about going to go find it, whether that's pick up games online, whether that's trying new systems, genres, fandoms at a convention. But there's so much out there, and there's so much growth and enjoyment and fun that you can be having if you're intentional about, let me go out there and explore something else.